Hi, this is Siofra's Magic Alcove and I'm Siofra Bradigan. So, I haven't done a video in a while because life has gotten in the way, as it often does when we practice magic. So I thought I'd let you know a little bit of update of what's been going on and what I've been up to and why I haven't been doing videos to start with. First, I just had my 70th birthday. And it was lots of fun, but lots of activity and all that other stuff. Made me think about how long it's been and how much time I've spent doing this kind of thing and some of the things that have happened. I've also been working on my wands. I started that project on the new moon before Samhain last year, and I've gotten to the point where I've actually started to create some of the finished wands. So I have 4 of them that I finished, and I thought you might like to see what they look like. This is the longest of them, and it's applewood. And I really like the applewood because it's got like these little knobbly things on it all the way down. But because it's so knobbly, I thought adding a little bit of leather towards the end of it would be a good idea. And so it has a rose quartz top on there. And let me look at my note, what this one has. This one has iolite on it. And iolite is sort of an interesting stone in that they used to make rings out of iolite to wear to help with divination. So it has many different potential properties depending on what you want to use the wand for. Potentially a divination tool, or helping to awaken the third eye, or your own ability, your own clairvoyance, and that kind of thing. So that's the first one that I finished. And this one is shorter, as you can see, and this one is myrtle wood. Myrtle wood is something that grows in our area. It only grows in this area in the world, so it's kind of a unique wood, and I made it to make my Venusian wand. And so because of that, I put rose quartz and emeralds, so you've got little emeralds in here. So this one could be a love wand, a healing wand, a Venusian wand, a lot of possibilities. So that's how big it is. And then this one here, this is a thinner wand, as you can see. I also made my own varnish out of frankincense and olive oil, and I varnished all the wands after I oiled them with linseed oil to start with. And so this is alder, and most of the alder that I harvested is kind of this color. Some of it got really black, the pieces that are at the end got kind of really dark. And then some of the newer growth, I'm assuming, is fairly light. So there's a wide variation in color with the alder. And this one here has angelite and amazonite around it and a clear quartz crystal. So you'd have to figure out what properties you wanted to use, which were the best ones for the work that you were doing. And I wanted to make each one of these a completely unique item, not like mass-produced and that kind of thing. So it takes longer for me to do them. And then the 4th one I finished is another apple wand, this one here. And this one has got amethyst. I put 2 larger amethyst cabochons on the top part of here with the rose quartz. So again, I love apple wood. It's just got a lovely energy to it. So, and we're about ready to put this up on our new Etsy site, which is the same as the video channel, Siofra's Magic Alcove. So probably be up in the next couple of days. You can check them out, and then if you have any desires, things that you would like to see, I've got a lot of wood yet to go through, but you can always send me a message and request something specific, and if I have it, I'll see if I can do it for you. So that's a lot of my time of late has been in working on these projects. But a couple of nights ago, I had an incredibly unique experience that I never even imagined could happen. So I went to bed and getting ready to go to sleep, and I usually cast a circle around my bed. I do the 4 elements and then above and below for the 5th element, and kind of imagine a sphere of energy there. And that's generally the visualization I've been using. And then the other night when I closed my eyes and started to drift off, I saw this long, bright blue filaments of light with silver sparkles all over them. And it was like they were being pulled out from somewhere, and they were forming a shape and a pattern. It was like someone was weaving them together, and it was sort of like a giant spider web of blue and silver sparks. And when it finished, it was big enough to cover my bed, and it kind of lifted up sort of like a balloon or parachute, I don't know, and just sort of gently wafted up towards the ceiling and then set in place. And I was like, wow, what was that? And I don't know what that was really, because I've never imagined anything like it before. So I find it fascinating that I can have such unusual, unique experiences still, no matter how long I've been at this. And I became aware that there was one of the Fae was standing next to my bed, and they often come in and visit me when I'm getting ready to go to sleep. That seems to be right now how our relationship is evolving. And so when I saw the Fae, I said, so did you make that? And the Fae said, no, you made that. And I said, I made that? So apparently I made that, according to the Fae anyway. And the only thing that makes sense to me is, like, I've been doing that, pulling in the directions, doing a focused on all three planes. Sometimes I do it just on the mental plane or the astral plane, sometimes the physical plane. And I've been doing this for, I don't know, I think it's been about 4 years ago or so that I started doing that, maybe even longer, I'm not quite sure. And I think that all that focus, energy, concentration, casting every night pretty much, apparently has evolved into this very unusual, weird looking thing that I really like. I like things that sparkle. You can get me with glitter, that's all there is to that. So it's what I wanted to talk about partially is that being a witch, living a magical existence, is about being open to having new experiences and not trying to shut them down or judge them or put them in a box, in my opinion anyway, as soon as they happen. Because life and the universe is huge, mysterious, and a lot of it we don't understand or know, and having a direct experience with the universe can have different shapes and colors for different people. Maybe no one else has ever seen this thing. Maybe I'm the only one who ever made one, or I don't know. Maybe lots of people have it, and if you have one of those, please let me know. I'd love to hear about it. But thinking back through my life, and of course birthdays always bring the past up, it's sort of unavoidable. I was thinking about my strong connection to different kinds of animal consciousness. I'm not sure exactly why that was the one that I focused on, but that was the one that sort of came up. And, as a child, my first encounter with animals was my pets. I had a cat, I had a dog. I made a really strong telepathic link with my cat. If I needed her for whatever reason, for comfort, to talk, to see, because my childhood was a horror place. I mean, there was horrible things going on all the time, and it was a very scary place to exist. And if I thought about her in a specific way, she would come from wherever she was. If she was outside or somewhere else in the house, she would just, suddenly be running up the stairs and into my bedroom and jump up on my bed. And I was very aware of that relationship, the psychic link, or whatever you want to call it, that I had with her. And, she was an important animal for me, especially in the beginning. And when we left my father, and she came with us, the first night we left, we made her stay in the house for a couple of weeks, the new apartment or whatever, and I was really worried about her leaving. I thought something bad would happen. And the first night we let her out, she got hit by a car. And she managed to find her way back to the apartment, and she was actually paralyzed, I think, from the waist down. And she managed to wake up my brother, which was a miracle because he was one of those kind of people he could sleep through a hurricane, a tornado, an earthquake. He was like dead asleep kind of thing. And he heard her and climbed. We were up on the second floor of the apartment buildings, and he actually climbed out his balcony down and brought her up. And my mother wouldn't let me go with her when they took my cat away, which was very upsetting to me because this was my cat. I mean, we'd been living together for a lot of years, and I was very attached, and I had to stay home because I was the oldest to take care of my two sisters and watch them while my mother and my brother went to find a vet. So I was always very upset about that, and this was my first experience with an animal spirit coming back, because probably about a month after Roscoe passed, I saw her in the living room out of the corner of my eye, like, you know, you often can see an animal or something moving out of the corner of your eye, and she came over and she jumped up on my lap, and I could feel the weight of her, which was quite interesting. And she curled up in a ball like she always used to do and just sat on my lap. She did that for a while, and then it kind of stopped, but it comforted me, and I was glad that she came back. So, interesting, before we had left my father was when I had an encounter with a black panther at the zoo. And that was probably an experience that would be a critical kind of experience, something that changes you on a fundamental way that you may not understand at the time, but it has that kind of an impact on you. And we lived near Washington, D.C., and the National Zoo in Washington, D.C. was a place that I liked to go when I was younger. I think I moved there in the 8th grade, so 1964 or 63. Yeah, it must have been 63 is when we started to move, and 64 was when we moved in. So I was 14 when we moved into the house in Virginia. And so I went to go see Mohini the white tiger. I always have been fascinated by tigers, a lot of us are, and white tigers were something extremely special at the time. And Mohini was a very famous white tiger, and she had had a litter of kittens, and they had just decided to let her be viewed by the public. And so I went specifically to go see the tiger. And they didn't have the zoos then the way they have them now. I mean, they have really expanded their version and vision of what they do with animals. Thank goodness for that. But back then, it was one big, huge building. It was the cat house, and all the big cats were in it. And so they had the lions, and they had certain different tigers. They had the panthers, and they were all sort of in a concrete environment behind glass. And not that big of a space for them. So it wasn't really what I would consider a good zoo. So I'm really glad that we've evolved somewhat. If we're going to have animals in a zoo, at least now they have a wide-ranging space in which to explore and so forth. But anyway, that was the way it was then. And so I'm standing in front of it with the crowd. There's a huge crowd. Everyone wants to go see the white tiger. That's what everybody is there for. And there's like 40 or 50 people at least. And I finally make my way to the front of the line where I can be there in front of the tiger. And all of a sudden I feel this weird tingling sensation on the back of my head. It was like, it's sort of like goosebumps, except it's more specific. It's just like right on the back of my head, everything just sort of went tickly thing. And I knew that someone was looking at me. That was what that sensation meant, that someone was looking at me. And I've had that happen with people too. So I turned around to see what it was, and over the top of the crowd, there was a black panther who was in his enclosure, and he was up on his big piece of wood. They had like a limb or whatever, and he was standing on top of the limb, so he was easy for me to see because he was high up. And I looked at him, and our eyes locked, and I was like immediately pulled into the green eyes of this animal, and I was like mesmerized. It's the only word that comes to mind. And so I'm standing there and I'm just like locked into this gaze with this being, and I'm suddenly seeing and feeling like an entire lifetime with the panther. I'm the mate, his female half, and we're running through the jungle. I'm hunting, I'm killing some animals, I'm laying in the sun and climbing trees. I had some cubs with him, and it was like this whole thing just sort of condensed in this instant of experience. And at this point, all the people, okay, I'm looking away from the tiger, and all the people in the room are looking toward the tiger and then toward me. And apparently at some point they realized that I was not looking at the tiger, and everyone in the room turned around to look to see what I was looking at. And when they did that, the panther put his eyes down and turned his back on the crowd and sat down and wouldn't look at anyone else. And I was just like, wow. I mean, hard to comprehend. What did that mean? It was certainly an experience. It gave me more of an awareness of a form of consciousness in other creatures besides people. And with animals, I've had a number of encounters that were sort of like that. When I was to Santa Cruz, I had an encounter with a horse that was actually quite hysterical. I was just staying in a cabin for a weekend and looked out the window, and there was a horse who was tied to a tree down there, and I was looking at the horse, and I could like feel everything the horse could feel. So, you know, it was springtime, just barely spring. It was still kind of cold out and stuff, and I suddenly felt, oh yeah, this horse really wants to just shake his coat and just like shake his head and his tail and just like shake all over. And I always talk out loud now when stuff like that happens. So my boyfriend at the time is in the room, and I'm talking to this horse, and I'm going like, oh, you just want to do this, and then the horse does that. And I'm like, oh, you just want to kick up your heels, and the horse kicks up his heels. And you just want to like roll all over the ground and kick your feet up in the air, and the horse does that. And I'm like, oh, you just want to run off. And then the horse broke its halter and ran away, and the poor people had to go and chase their horse down. I felt bad about that, but I don't think I did it. I think I just knew what the horse was going to do, and I expressed it. But I was feeling kind of impish maybe that day. So I looked at my boyfriend and I said, so there's no telepathy between people and animals, huh? And then I walked out of the room and just sort of left it like that, which I thought was pretty sweet. So it's I'm often talking to animals out loud when I meet them, other people's dogs. A lot of times they'll tell me what's wrong with them, where they hurt. Sometimes they'll show me pictures as to how they got hurt. And you know, it's like, I feel like I need to say it out loud, because saying it out loud means I'm listening. It tells the animal and myself that I'm listening, that there's something going on. If there's other people around, then they can see what's happening and decide whether it's real or not. So yeah, and even before, I'm jumping all around timeline. Before I went down to Santa Cruz, I had an encounter with an octopus. And I'd been at the medicine wheel ceremonies like 4 years in a row before I left Canada and came back to the States. And at the last one I was at, one of the things they talked about was the octopus. And the Haida see the octopus as a protector, guardian kind of thing. And I just thought that was kind of cool. And on our way back from British Columbia down to the United States, we stopped at the aquarium there. And we'd been at the aquarium for hours. And it was about closing time. And I'm like, wait a minute, I forgot to see the octopus. So I look at the map and figure out where the octopus is. And so I march everybody back to where the tank is with the octopus. And it's a pretty big sized tank. I mean, it's not a little tank, because it's not a really little octopus. It's not a giant octopus, but it's definitely not a little octopus. And I get there and the tank looks empty. And I'm like, oh dear, I'm so disappointed. I really wanted to see an octopus. And then I look around and I see way off down in the corner, in between some rocks, in the shade, I can see an eye closed, and I can see it breathing, moving. And there's the octopus. They're so great. They can like hide in these tiny little spots. So he was taking a nap. And so I looked at him, and my habit of talking out loud was, in full swing. So I started talking to the octopus, and I'm like, oh, octopus, I've heard so much about you. I've heard how beautiful you are. I've heard all about your tentacles and your wonderful suckers, and I was really hoping that I could see them before I have to leave. Would you please come out and show me your beauty? And, I'm sure the people in the room were like looking sideways, like, what the hell's wrong with this woman? She's talking to an octopus. And my kids are often embarrassed by these things. Oh, well, they have me as a mom. They have to deal with it. And then all of a sudden, the octopus comes out from that little bitty hole and comes out, and this tank is big enough that I'm standing up, and the middle of the tank is at my eye level. So that's how, tall the tank was. And the octopus comes up to my eye level and then goes like this and spreads himself all over the glass. She spread out all of his tentacles so I could see every single sucker. And I'm just like, wow, this is fantastic. He's like, I can't believe this. This is the most amazing thing. Thank you so much. And he's like, have you seen enough yet, lady? Can I go back to sleep? And I'm like, okay, thank you so much for showing me your beautifulness. And then he curled himself back up and went back in his hole, and then we were gone. And I sometimes wonder when things like that happen out in public, what the other people in the room thought about what was going on. I have no clue. Because if it happened and I was around, I'd be going like, oh, how cool, that's so neat. So I guess the notion here is that there are opportunities to encounter magical reality all around us, all the time. It's there. And you just never know when something like that could just happen if you're open to it. So I'd love to hear some of your own encounters if you have had some encounters with animals. Certainly as empaths, a lot of empaths get links with animal consciousnesses and that kind of thing, but not just empaths. And I'd love to hear what you might have to share about that if you were willing. And then, we can encourage one another to let other people know that kind of stuff is a reality. We may not be able to explain it necessarily scientifically, but certainly I had plenty of witnesses in the room with the octopus, and I've done a few other things, like I had an anteater in Hawaii that I wanted to look at, and I convinced him to come out of his house and show himself to me briefly. He was kind of annoyed because it was hot and it was nap time, but he did come out and say, okay, have you seen enough? Can I go back now? I'm like, thank you. It doesn't always work, but it's amazing how often it does. And I think animals are like to encourage that kind of a connection. They're usually surprised when it happens because most people aren't paying attention. So, hey, go out and explore nature and see if you get a connection with an animal, or, talk more with your pet, or whatever happens is a good thing. So that's just what I wanted to talk about today, and just to give you a brief update on what's going on. And if you have any questions or things you would like me to cover, always feel free, send me a message, and I will take it to heart and figure out if I know anything, and I'll share it with you. So this has been Siofra's Magic Alcove, and I'm Siofra Bradigan. Blessed be.